Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, I can hear you.
Awesome. All right. So I'm Jordan. I am not Brian. I am
Hey,
the tech guy.
cool.
But Brian's here. Just give me a moment. Here.
All right, no problem.
Okay. So I think we're gonna get the show started in about 15 minutes.
Okay, great.
So hang out, do whatever you want. But
Yeah.
let me give it to Brian here. He'll kind of run you through it.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Hey, how are you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going, Brian?
Very good, very good. Nice to meet you.
Good.
As it
Yeah,
were.
you too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, excited to talk to you. But we got 15 minutes, and I don't.
Cool.
Let's just chill, all right?
Yeah,
'Cause
totally.
I always find that like all the questions I want to ask you are the ones that I want to ask on the broadcast. So
Right,
yeah.
totally.
So just sit back, read the internet, and we'll start in 15 or so. All right?
Perfect. Sounds
You're
great.
actually right on top of it. Half the time, like people don't sign in until 2 minutes before. So
Oh, right. Awesome.
love it, love it, love it, love
Cool.
it.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
Okay, very good, very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am talking.
I'm normally I'm in Portland, but I'm in Seattle right now. Yeah. It's actually not too bad. It's like especially the part of town that I'm in, the rate is really really low for new infection and stuff like that. So doing okay here. How about down there? Yeah, yeah, right. Totally right. Right, totally. Yeah, right, totally right. How's business been for you guys despite the shutdown? Are you doing online orders or things like that? Hmm. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Oh, totally. Oh, wow. That's awesome. Cool. Oh, nice. Yeah, I just watched the interview you did with Sarah Grayley. It was really, really fun. Yeah. Yeah, I love her work. Yeah. Cool. Have you been reading anything good recently with any extra free time? Right, right. Are you still getting like book orders, or is it just diamond stuff, or is it everything? Hmm. Huh, who's that by? Oh, I haven't heard of that. Hmm. Oh, wow. Cool. Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, her work's amazing. Yeah, I've actually been reading. I brought a couple of the books I'm reading just in case we wanted to talk about it, but I've been reading Debbie and Pearl, Digital Detective. You heard of this one? Oh yeah, yeah. I love excuse me, love that book. Yeah, my friend Katie did the art for that. She's super great. Oh, was it? Oh, that's great. I didn't see that on the list there. Uh, okay, yeah. Right, right, totally. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Oh yeah, Katie's a local down there, isn't she? Oh man, that's funny. the only time I ever really see her. I mean, we met at Emerald City a couple of years ago, so it's like she's my Emerald City Comic Con buddy. So yeah. Oh, I know, totally. Yeah, her fashion is amazing and like super cute and yeah. Cool. All right.
All right, we're gonna go live in 5, 4, 3.
Good morning, or afternoon, I suppose, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of April 2020. We're still in COVID lockdown for people in the future. This sucks, by the way. This COVID lockdown stuff is just awful. It's awful. But we can still read great comics. That's the great thing about being trapped at home. And this month's book, The Sunken Tower by TAIT Howard, is that great book. And we are so lucky to have TAIT here on video. Say hi, TAIT.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
You froze. Your video froze up just at that moment,
Oh,
right when I
geez.
introduced you.
Hi, everyone.
There we go. We can see you now. Yeah, no, this was a great book, man.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about it. But my first question is, and my first question always will be,
Hmm.
why comics? Of all of the things you could do with your life, what is it about comics that made you go, oh yeah, I love this so much?
Yeah, totally. Um, so I got into comics when I was probably in middle school. Like I'd read, newspaper strips mostly, and like Archie or Sonic comics, whatever was at the grocery store. But in middle school, someone introduced me to Image Comics, and so I started reading Spawn and all of those other like kind of, edgy kind of, I don't know what you want to call them, kind of stuff from Image. But that was what got me into it. But originally, I kind of wanted to do animation, but the reason that I like comics so much is that you can do it all by yourself. Like you only need a team of one person to do a comic if you want to. You can do it with more people, and it's always fun to work with other people. But I just like the creative freedom that I get from being like, okay, I wrote this, I drew this, I colored it, I did everything, and that means that I can make changes all the way through. If I'm like, oh, this part's not working, I can just drop it. Or I just like the freedom that it gives me to do kind of whatever I want to do and not really need a, budget or a lot of money to do it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that answer. That's a
Thanks.
perfect answer.
Yeah.
Um, you went straight from Archie to Spawn.
Yeah.
That seems
Yeah,
like a
pretty much.
pretty big jump.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Calvin and Hobbes, I think, was probably the biggest thing that I read when I was younger. I've always liked Calvin and Hobbes, but The Far Side also. I
Yeah.
was definitely more of a newspaper comics kid, but it was like when we were at the grocery store, if I saw a comic at the checkout, I'd be like, "Mom, give me this comic. I want comics."
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Did you go to school at all to study comics?
I did, yeah. I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design. I did a 4-year degree there, and graduated in 2011. So I've been out for like, what is it, 9 years now?
Yeah,
Wow, that's
wow.
crazy to think
Yeah,
about. But yeah, yeah, I went there for comics specifically. They have a program called Sequential Art, which is both comics and storyboarding for TV or movies or animation or whatever. And it's definitely more focused on the comic side of stuff. So that's kind of where I got my start because, a lot of the people who are now editors that I work with or whatever are people that I graduated with from school there.
yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Um, uh, so you knew that you wanted to make comics, you know, at a pretty young age. I mean, at
Totally.
18 years old, you're picking your college and you're
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, actually, so now that I'm thinking about it, I think the first comics that I ever drew myself were some Kirby, the Nintendo character Kirby, like fan comics that I made when I was in grade school. And I would make them and photocopy them and then sell them to my relatives and to other classmates and stuff like that. So,
Wow, you were like an entrepreneur at a young age. That's
yeah,
fantastic.
totally.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, no, anybody can make and sell a comic. That's one of the things that's great
Exactly.
about it, you know?
That's yeah, exactly what I was talking about. That's part of why I love it so much. And that part of it definitely came later when I realized like, oh, like, this isn't something that you can only do when you're a kid. You can do this all the time. People will always want to buy little books from you or whatever.
Yeah. Did you continue to self-publish little comics and zines and things like that as you got older, or was that just a little phase?
Yeah, so I did that when I was younger, and then probably when I was in my late teens is when I started doing it again. So I
Okay.
was doing it in grade school, in first and second grade, I think, and then for probably like 5 or 6 years, I didn't do it as much. Just wasn't something that I was as interested in.
Yeah. But nothing like into your college years.
No, so actually, into college, yeah, part of the cool thing about going to school for comics was it introduced me to a really wide range of comics. Like when I went in, comics was like, okay, there's, some smaller places that publish like, stuff like the Sunken Tower. But really I thought of comics as like, okay, there's Marvel and DC and Image, and that's
Right.
kind of my idea of it. But going to school for it really introduced me to a lot of I learned about really good manga. I discovered a lot of manga that I like. I
Mm-hmm.
discovered a ton of indie comics, and I think the biggest thing was I discovered kind of indie zine type comics, or I guess rediscovered them or whatever. Um, but so I had tons and tons of friends at school who were all making their own little mini comics and things like that. So I started doing it too. Uh, and I think the first when I first started really getting work, it was because I was sending out some of those minis that I had made to publishers and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Before we go much further, I just want to remind any of the kids on the stream, if you have a question, you can ask it there in chat, and Jordan will pass it to me, and I'll ask it on the air for you. So anytime during this, feel free to ask questions for Tate. We'll get to those in a bit. So Tate, where did the Sunken Tower come from?
So, part of it, I think the kind of genesis for the idea came when I was rewatching the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is, a classic, obviously, and was kind of thinking about how so much fantasy, or at least the fantasy that I was really familiar with, was all really like Tolkien kind of fantasy. It was all like dragons and swords and sorcery and orcs and trolls and those kind of tropes that you associate with fantasy when you hear that word. And I wanted to do something that was fantasy. I was watching that movie and thinking, okay, this is really cool. I love fantasy, but I like sci-fi more. And why is it that I like sci-fi more? And I realized it's because sci-fi just feels like it has more kind of unlimited possibilities for what can be happening in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that fantasy can do that too. You can also do whatever you want in a fantasy story, as long as you're willing to kind of break out of those conventions of like, oh, these are the kind of creatures that live in a fantasy world. Like these are the kind of things that happen in a fantasy world. So I wanted to do something that was both I don't know, not ideologically, but just sort of based on. I guess what I'm trying to say is I wanted to do something that was fantasy, but just like different and whatever I wanted to do in fantasy. And a huge inspiration for it was definitely like Bone or like Jeff Smith stuff, just because That's another one where it's like, it's fantasy, definitely, but, you know, there's rat creatures and there's like, you know, the bones, the weird little, like, you know, simple cartoony characters and stuff like that. So I wanted to make something that was a fantasy, but that was like very weird and out there and fun, and that wouldn't be instantly recognizable as like, oh, this is like this kind of fantasy universe.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's a big long answer. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you? I'm just out of curiosity. Have you ever played like D&D, things like that?
Yeah, I have actually. I actually started playing after I had already finished writing this book.
Oh, interesting.
I have, you know, a group of friends that plays down in Portland. So we used to get together, you know, once a week or once every 2 weeks to play, and kind of fell off just because of, you know, work and life stuff. But
Sure.
yeah, I love D&D.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Um, did so. What was the process of sort of conceiving and pitching the Sunken Tower? I mean, you've spoken about where your motivation for doing the book came from, but maybe tell us a little bit about sort of the mechanical side of
Sure.
you know, trying to build a whole world and pitch it and that side.
Right, totally. So Sunken Tower was kind of an interesting process because it was actually originally published by a company called Stila, who does digital only comics.
Interesting.
It's a phone and iPad app primarily. I think it may be online now, but I'm not sure. But either way, they approached me and said they were looking for someone to do a story for them. And the Sunken Tower was something that it wasn't like a fully fleshed out idea. Like you know, it wasn't what it is now when I had thought of it originally. But they had basically, you know, said, hey, we like your work and we're interested in working with you. Do you have anything you want to pitch to us? So I said, yeah, let me think about, you know, what ideas I have right now that are, you know, that I want to pitch or that I want to turn into a pitch. And originally, the Sunken Tower was going to be about, it was going to focus almost entirely just on Dig, not on the two other main characters, Iana and Krina. And he was going to be kind of this like soldier, not like a soldier, but you know, someone who would be part of the kind of retinue of an army, and he would be trapped alone in this kind of war-torn city, and it would be about him kind of navigating this war-torn city. And then it slowly turned into an idea to I thought, okay, what's a cool genre that I could like kind of mash up with the fantasy genre? And I thought like a prison break story would be really cool to do in a fantasy universe. So I pitched that, and they really liked it, and it kind of went from there. And then part of that deal was that I got to keep the book publishing rights to the story. So when the term and I can't remember the exact how long it was in the contract, but basically after some time was up, I took it to Oni and said, hey, I want to do this, but I want to add a whole bunch to the story. I want to redraw a lot of stuff. I want to so basically the book version of it is a sort of redrawn version of the digital one that came out initially.
Interesting. Wow, I didn't know the whole digital part at all. That's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
What when was that?
So that was, I believe, 2014 or 15 was when it came out originally. Yeah. So that's, I think that's the only place that you can get the digital version of the book, just because they, you know, kept the rights to the digital copy or whatever. But.
Yeah. Did was I going to say? Was it a novella length or a novel length story, or was it shorter? Was it in chunks? How was it?
So it came out as chapters. It was six chapters, and I think so. Basically, the biggest new part of it is everything up until like this page, the big opening page. All of the part in the market and everything before that is brand new, as well as I added just a couple pages to the end, I think, just to flesh out the ending. But basically, it was the same story. Yana and Krina's relationship was a little bit less developed. I kind of refer to it or think about it as like a first draft of the story, basically.
Yeah. And when you say you redrew it, did you literally redraw every page or just some of it?
So yeah, it was just some of it. Basically, it was a lot of kind of taking like, let me see if I can find a page here that's a good example, but yeah, so like for this page where there's a big kind of flashback scene, initially this would just be like read on a phone, like it would just be one tall image. So basically it was a lot of just taking panels that were already there and then cutting them up and putting them back together on page layouts in Photoshop.
Right.
And so a lot of the redrawing was like, oh, okay, you know, I don't think this drawing is as good as it could be. Just redrawing some faces, and then you know, just because there was like a 3-year time difference between the digital and the physical edition, and then adding panels just to you know, better fit the story that I was trying to tell and stuff like that.
Yeah, neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never encountered someone who's had a book done that way. That make it.
I know it's really interesting. There's I think Jen Bartel has a book that she did. I can't remember the name of it. That was the same thing where it came out on phones originally, and then I think it's called Crystal Fighters. Yeah, there were a whole bunch of people in that first wave of Stila artists who all ended up doing the same kind of thing, basically.
Yeah. When you this actually brings up an interesting question, because if it was more designed for mobile, how did you think about your page composition and things like that differently than you would for a print publication?
I did, yeah, definitely. It was kind of cool actually, just to work in a little bit of a different format. There's a couple panels in here, like some really tall panels in like this part initially at the end was you know, one giant long panel where you
Right.
sort of followed the creature falling down the well.
Yeah.
So it was cool because I got a chance to do some kind of weird layout stuff that I never would be able to do on a page, you know, because I could have like a 3-foot tall panel if I wanted to. This one as well, the big tall one. That was even taller originally, and you know, you'd have to scroll so you couldn't see the whole image at once. So yeah, it was definitely a very different you know, process writing and drawing for that kind of format, and also, you know, thinking about like, okay, people are going to read this on the phone, so I can't have like 4 panels next to each other because then each panel will be like that big, you know.
Yeah. When you were I don't know if readapting it might be the right word.
Yeah, I feel like
for the
that's
print
right, yeah.
page. Were there any particular challenges to, you know, pacing and you know, because a lot of comics are about rhythm, you know, about the beat of
Totally,
the page,
yeah.
right? And so moving it from one to another, how was that a hard process, an easy process? I don't know.
It was I would say a pretty easy process. I feel like because my strategy was to kind of I went through the whole thing as it was digitally or as it was written and drawn originally, and kind of went through and went, okay, like what jokes in here can be kind of stretched out or not stretched out, but what jokes can be made to work better if I put it on a page and stuff like that. So I think the most challenging part of it was all of the parts where I didn't have a really specific idea, and I was kind of like, okay, well, these images need to go on this page here, but how do I do that? How do I, you know, where do I cut them off? Where do I add to it and things like that? So it was kind of a mixed bag. It was a really fun process actually, just because it was kind of totally new and unique, not something that I'm normally doing when I make comics.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. I'm going to go to a couple of kids' questions because I've got a couple of them backed up here.
Great.
And again, guys, if you're watching from home, please feel free to ask questions. We'll get them asked for you. Mia DeSanto asks, and I think you kind of answered this, but you can answer it maybe in a longer way. How long have you made comics? How long have you been making them?
Let's see. I would say I've probably been making comics since I was in first grade. That's probably where I would consider my start in comics. When I wasn't making mini comics and things like that, I was definitely drawing a lot of just like single panel doodle comics and things like that in the margins of all my notes at school. And I have been into comics for as long as I can remember, and I've probably been making comics since I was 5 or 6.
How many of those early comics do you have, do you think?
I'm pretty sure that my parents have saved all of them.
Oh, nice.
I'm pretty sure there's a box in the basement somewhere that just has all of those old Kirby comics that I did and things like that.
You're not curious to look at them?
No, I think the last time that I went through that box was like 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh,
when
okay.
my parents were getting rid of some stuff. So I've seen them recently, just not super recently.
Very good.
Yeah.
Let's see. Axel has a question, which maybe is not for you specifically. Maybe it's for both of us. But what is the difference between comic books and graphic novels? Do you have an answer for that?
I think that I mean, kind of traditionally or in general, I would think of a comic book as like a floppy, a little 20 to 30 page thing, and then a graphic novel would be like a longer collection, or something like the Sunken Tower, where it's one self-contained story all in one. But I actually think the term changeable. I don't think there's like a hard rule about what's a comic and what's a graphic novel. I think it's kind of a matter of what you want to call it,
Exactly. I would agree with that. I mean, comics are comics.
Yeah.
Comic book and graphic novel are formats more than
Right.
talking about the thing, comics.
Totally.
Just in the same way that some people talk about manga separately, but manga is literally just the Japanese word for comics.
Right, exactly, totally. Yeah, or bande dessinée or whatever in France.
Yep.
And yeah.
Yep. That's a good question, Axel. But don't worry about it too much. There's not really a big difference about them.
People will know what you're talking about.
You know what it really is, Axel? It's that in the 80s, people were really worried that comics were only for children, if you can believe this. It seems so silly to say these things out loud now, but the comic book industry was like, we want to be serious adults, and we want things to be really serious, and comics aren't for kids. And so certain people who wanted to kind of make that their thing said, we're going to call them graphic novels because it makes them sound fancier. and that's really the actual answer. There is no difference. It's just adults trying to make themselves feel fancy. Adults do a lot of silly things. Let's see. I got an email from Enzo Mitchell. He has 2 questions for you today.
All right.
Number 1 is how did you design the clothes for each character?
Oh, that's a really cool question. So part of it was when I was in art school, one of the things that they taught us about character design was to give people a really unique silhouette. If a character has a really unique silhouette, it's a lot more recognizable than one that doesn't. Like, think about, Batman as an instantly recognizable silhouette just because of those 2 little things on his head, or Bart Simpson is because he's got a bunch of little things on his head, or, any of the Simpsons, really. So part of it was I like to keep clothing and character design pretty simple, just because if I'm going to sit there and draw the same character 150 or 300 times in a book, it's a lot more fun for me if it's something simple and graphic, and that's what I really enjoy drawing, at least for people, is I like cartooning and stuff. But so part of the reason that I chose those clothes was because each of them gives them a little bit of a silhouette. I guess Krina here doesn't have quite as much of a silhouette, but even just those little kind of like arm flare things on her shoulders, tried to give her just a little bit of a thing. So part of it was making them all different sizes. So Dig's really small, medium, large. And then part of it was, wanting to give them a good silhouette. So Dig has the little hat, he's got the bag and the kind of puffy pants. Yana has the kind of shoulder, the I don't know what that is, like fur or whatever kind of lining and stuff. So yeah, that's most of the reasoning behind it. But I also wanted to make them in clothes that weren't like super time period specific. I wanted to make them a little bit more like I feel like that's more of like a 60s kind of dress almost. I don't know. I just wanted to kind of give them each their own unique character that you could tell a little bit just who they were from looking at them.
Yeah, that's good. I'm gonna follow up on that question myself.
Yeah.
How about the monsters? Well, they're not monsters, I guess, but the denizens of the tower.
Yeah, totally. So that was, I mean, the clothing for them was actually sort of a callback, or not really a callback, but for my own enjoyment. When I was really young, I used to draw these scenes where I would draw like a bunch of cultists and monsters and like wizards all fighting each other and stuff. Really, really simple little kind of stick figure things. And so little red hooded cultists were like my favorite thing to draw on those. So I've always really liked just the super simple robe with like a big red hood that sticks way, way out in the back. And I didn't want to make all of the monsters look the same. I didn't want to have all the cultists look like they were from the same place or from the same kind of culture or whatever. I wanted it to feel more like kind of loose grouping of like weird little monsters and freaks or whatever who all decided like, all right, well, I guess I'm going down into this cave to summon this like monster thing or whatever. So yeah, just kind of to keep it fun for myself also. Just having a bunch of goofy, weird, little cute monsters.
Did you make model sheets for each one of the cult members?
I didn't actually. A lot of them were kind of just made up on the spot as I was drawing it. I actually don't do a ton of pre-planning in my drawings or for my comics. I a lot of the time will do some of the monster designs just on the page as I'm drawing, just because that's kind of how I keep it fun, keep from having to draw the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah. Did that prove a challenge in terms of just sort of that continuity, the art direction continuity? Like, oh wait, which one was I drawing last time?
Yeah, yeah, it really did, because each monster also has a different weapon.
Yes.
So there was a lot of going back through and just like opening up old pages just to see which monster had what weapon or which monster had what designs on his cloak or whatever. So yeah, I think there's at least one place in the book where one monster switches weapons with another for a panel or two.
Right. Did you was there any particular thought between which monster had which weapon, or was it just kind of what it felt fun to draw?
A little bit of mostly just what felt fun to draw. I wanted all the weapons to look very beat up and dirty. Like, these aren't, highly trained people. These are like just dudes who grabbed whatever they could find on the floor of this cave, and that's what they're using as weapons.
Yeah. Very good. Enzo's second question. This will be a much shorter, well, probably will be a much shorter answer.
Yeah.
Enzo asks, will there be another book?
I hope so. So I haven't talked to Oni about it specifically yet. The release has been a little bit weird just because, it came out basically right when all of this COVID stuff started.
Right.
I was actually, supposed to debut it at Emerald City Comic Con. I think a week or two after everything started. So Emerald City Comic Con was canceled and all
Yep.
that. But if I do get to do a sequel, I have lots of ideas. I know, I'd like it to pick up right where it leaves off, kind of, or shortly after. So the next book would take place all in Cooktown, if that's something that gets to happen. And I have lots of ideas for what I want to do with the characters. There's going to be a lot more backstory for Iana and Krina in the next one as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, this is if you were here. The original plan, of course, is that you were going to be here. We even bought plane
Right,
tickets.
exactly.
And this is the point where I would ask the kids in the room, so guys, you want another book? And they'd all go, yeah, and they'd all really freak out, and it would be great. So just pretend that that's happening right now, because I'm sure they're all saying that at home. They're all like screaming and yelling and going, yeah, I want more too. That's great, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
A couple of people asked on the list, like, will there be a sequel already? So.
Okay, yeah, very good. Yeah, no, I think Sarah Grayle's comment on the back, the pull quote is full of action-packed hijinks. I mean, yes, that's what this book is, and I want to see more action-packed hijinks.
Yeah,
boy,
totally.
do I want to see more. I loved this. I thought this was just so much fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. Part of the reason I called it kind of a second draft or like the final draft of the story I was laying out in the digital version is when I was doing the version for Stila originally. My editor there said, I had just started drawing the book, and he was like, "Yeah, let's get you on for a second one. I want to do another one of these. I like this already." And the company kind of, a little bit. So, is my connection? Oh, okay. I'm still here. I just had a little bit of lag.
Yeah, a little bit of lag.
Okay. Sorry, what was I saying? I was saying
second book.
Yeah. Basically, so when I was writing the first and drawing the first book, I had all these ideas. I was like, oh, this is so great. I know exactly what I'm going to do for number 2 and all that. So when that company sort of went under or, stopped publishing new work, I was really bummed because I have all these ideas for a sequel. So it's in there. It's ready to go whenever.
Yeah, cool. Here's just an odd technical question on that. What would you call the second book? Because obviously you've left the Sunken Tower now, right?
I know.
You didn't didn't call it The Adventures of Dig, the Sunken Tower.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot. I think probably what I'd do is something along the lines of the His Dark Materials series, where they've got the Golden Compass and the Amber Spyglass and the Subtle Knife. Have it be something where each title is the name of a location or a special location that they visit. So that's kind of my idea. Also, I could just call it Sunken Tower Book 2, because one of the things is I would really like to have things have some callbacks to the tower in the first one. If I do a second one, is I'd like to have what was going on at the tower be kind of a bigger part of the larger world than it seems in this first one.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Let's see. Axel, back to Axel, asks again, what is a book that you really want to write or draw that you haven't done yet or haven't had the opportunity?
So right now I have a book. I've only pitched it to one company so far, and they rejected it. But I think it was just because it was a little bit more. It's more aimed towards like middle school or high school students, and I think they were looking for something for a younger audience. But anyway, it's a story about a girl who lives in this town where these kind of strange supernatural things are going on, and she slowly finds out over the course of the story that there's the body of this giant monster or kind of god thing that's buried underneath the town that's causing all of these problems. So that's something that I'm kind of pitching still right now that I'd really like to do.
That's neat. That's neat.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess that maybe Axel is maybe asking you, is there a character that you'd like to do? Somebody else's character maybe.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Let me think about that. I think I've done a little bit of licensed stuff. I did an Invader Zim Halloween special last year, and I've done a little bit for Adventure Time. I think it'd be really, really cool to get to do some. Oh gosh, does Craig of the Creek have a comic? That's my favorite cartoon show right now, and
No, I don't think so.
that's okay. If not Craig of the Creek, then probably. Either Steven Universe or maybe Rick and Morty. I've done a couple covers for Rick and Morty that were pretty fun to do. I feel like that'd be a pretty fun comic to work on.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. I got another question from Mia DeSanto. How did you think of their names?
Dig is named Digby just because I think Digby is a really funny name, but also because it ties in a little bit with, he's trying to get out from underground or whatever. I thought that was kind of fun. And then Iana and Krina, I wanted to come up with some names that sounded real or, kind of grounded in reality, but that were also a little bit kind of fantastical or a little bit weirder. So I looked through or I guess not weirder, just more, more unique than a lot of kind of names that you would hear, like Western type names. So I looked through a book of Czechoslovakian baby names and picked both of their names from there just because I actually can't remember what either of those names means, but I just liked the meaning of them, so I gave them those names.
Interesting. And did you just happen to have a book of Czechoslovakian baby names around, or
not a book, just online?
Oh, online. Okay. I like the idea of an actual printed book of Czechoslovakian baby names.
I know.
Okay, and how did you set upon Czechoslovakia, the Czech names?
Yeah. I think I picked that because it's they're definitely all kind of like fantasy white characters, and I didn't want to pick any names that were, I wanted something kind of Eastern European sounding, something, that sounded like a fantasy type name, and since I don't speak Czech and I am not as familiar, it sounded like a cool kind of place to grab from.
Mm-hmm. Did you have the intention that this was a kid's book in your head when you were creating it on the phone? Did they or did the publisher want that specifically?
No, actually, originally, I didn't have any specific idea that, oh, this is going to be a kid's story, or, oh, this is going to be, for this age group. They were very open to letting me do kind of whatever I wanted. That one of the cool things about working for that company was, I had a great editor. My editor, Caleb, was very, very open to just letting me do what I wanted to do. He was like, yeah, your ideas are good. Let's just, give you kind of free reign to do whatever you want. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Sorry.
Yeah. I guess my follow-up would be, when did you realize it was or could be a kid's book? Or actually, even, is there a difference in your head between a book for adults and a book for kids.
Right. I mean, I don't actually put that big of a distinction in my head. You know, the stuff that I read is usually stuff that would be considered like kids books. Like, uh, if any of you have ever read Gone,
So
this is
good.
probably like my favorite book of all time. There's no words in it; it's all just images. And you know, Masashi Tanaka did that because he wanted it to be readable by anyone. And that's what I like about comics, is that you don't really have to put an age range on it. Like, you know, I think pretty commonly people use the term all ages now for like, oh, this is a comic that's for everyone. And that's kind of what I like to think of my stuff as, is it's like I like to write stuff that kids can read. You know, I don't want to put a bunch of like curse words or
Too much
other stuff
blood.
like that in it.
Yeah.
So keeping the story kind of lighthearted and fun and friendly to kids is something that I'm kind of trying to do anyway, you know.
Yeah, no, and I always think that a lot of the best not just comics, but entertainment of all kinds, is stuff that's, is intended for kids, but adults can appreciate it as well. I mean, my favorite movie of all
Totally.
time, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh
I
yeah,
love that movie.
absolutely.
I could watch that movie any day, time or night, and it's great for
Yeah,
kids and it's
yeah.
great for adults too. So
Totally. Yeah, yeah. And I feel the same, you know, talking about Steven Universe, especially, like that's really a show that's, you know, definitely for everyone. It feels like, you know, you can really enjoy it as a kid, and then, you know, as an adult, you can also get a lot of, you know, just kind of good insight into other stuff about it, you know.
yeah, yeah. All right, I got one more question. This one's from Ethan Bold, and Ethan does me the great favor of doing the pivot to the craft questions. Did you draw this on paper or did you draw it on the computer digitally?
So it was a combination of the two. Because of the weird process of doing it, you know, for phones first. When I started the book, I was still doing everything traditionally. I didn't have a tablet at the time, so you know, I basically, or no, sorry, I had a tablet. I just didn't. I had a really small one that I just used for coloring. So I did all of the inking traditionally. Uh, so I actually have somewhere, I have a stack of Bristol that I've cut down to like phone screen dimensions, but just
Mm-hmm.
blown up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and you know, some of those panels are, you know, a foot and a half or 2 feet tall or whatever. Um, but basically, what I did was penciled and inked it traditionally, just on some kind of weird sized paper, scanned that in, colored it digitally, and then when I transferred it over into book form, I basically took the entire thing. You know, I opened up every page of it in Photoshop, uh, grabbed what I needed off the page, off of, you know, just a flat image file, and dragged it into another document to, you know, move, so I can move panels around and see how everything fit together. So it was a really a big combination of both. You know, all of the redrawing and stuff that I did for this version was all done digitally. So any facial expressions I changed, or any time I needed to lengthen a panel just by a little bit so that it would fit on the page better, I would just basically just be drawing right on top of the fully colored finished art.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's your preferred way to work, I guess? Physical or
I
digital?
I prefer traditional.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the feeling of just putting pen or, you know, paint or whatever on paper. And also just having, you know, a physical object when I'm done is really nice. I like having a page that's there that I can hang up on my wall or sell or whatever, you
Yeah.
know. But I basically do all of my comics work digitally, just for speed's sake.
Right.
You know, I think it took me probably twice as long as it would have taken to draw the Sunken Tower originally, if I had uh, because I did it traditionally, it took me twice as long as if I had done it digitally. So the last two books that I did that are not out yet, those were both 100% digital.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ethan's second question is, what is your favorite brand of pen or marker, or the app that you use?
Yeah.
Or both, even.
Oh yeah. So I really like. I use a lot of Micron pens. Those are kind of my go-to because they're super cheap. You can grab a handful of them for under $10, and I do enjoy inking with a brush. I use a Winsor Newton number 2 round. Um, I like brush a lot because you get it's just really fun to work with, and I do a lot of painting too. So I would say, I mean, ideally, if I could paint every single one of my comics, if I could just do full watercolor, I would, but no one has time for that. So um, I do most of my stuff with brush or just with pen when I'm doing traditional inking type stuff, and then when I'm doing digital stuff, I just use Photoshop and do it all.
Yeah.
Do it all just with a basic round brush in Photoshop.
Very good. The lettering is a font, yes? It's not your hand. It's not a font based on
No,
your handwriting.
it's not. And Aditya Bidikar did the lettering for this, and he did a great job. I did pretty much all of the like hand drawn sound effects are mine, and then any of the lettering, and there's a couple sound effects that he put in there as well. So yeah, lettering is fun to do. It's just really time consuming.
Yeah.
Like, I would say probably like a month of each project is just sitting there and drawing panel borders and putting in lettering. So having a letterer on this book was really great, just to not have to do that.
Yeah, sure. What else? I actually think we asked most of the process stuff. Oh, I know. How about let's talk about your when you're starting a book and you've got a blank page. Are you writing a script out? Are you thumbnailing it directly? Are you doing it kind of just here's some plot points? Are you just drawing and seeing what happens?
Yes to all of those.
Yay! Okay, that's the best
I
answer.
basically, yeah, it's a big combination of all of that. I pretty much always start out by just sitting down with like a sketchbook and a pencil, and I'll write every idea that comes into my head. I'll draw every little doodle that comes into my head that's related to it, and kind of try to just get all the ideas I have out there. And sometimes that takes the form of like I'll be sitting there and it'll be like, oh, I know exactly what needs to happen in this part of the story, so I'll just go write that down. And usually it takes me probably, I would say, a month or two of doing stuff like that while I'm working on other stuff before I feel usually ready to, pitch a book or make it myself or whatever. I do my thumbnailing kind of at the same time as my writing. So, I'll have this once that sketchbook has all of the kind of like basic plot points or has an outline, and I've kind of sketched out most of the characters or know what they're about, then I can sit down and go through and start to basically just draw a little mini version of it and write it at the same time, or write a rough version of it. So,
and how sketchy are your thumbnails? Are they super sketchy or?
It really depends. So I think for Sunken Tower, my thumbnails were almost just scribbles with stick figures. But then sometimes when I do more, like I've done one or two painted comics, and for those I'll usually do like really really detailed pencil sketches with like shading and everything, just so I can see what kind of needs to pop out. So it just depends on the project, really.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what I had a question there and it just popped out of my head. So, oh, you said you've got a couple of books that that you've been working on that haven't come out yet.
Yes, that's correct.
Would you care to plug some things?
Yeah, so both of them are pretty far from coming out, but one of them is actually, I guess I probably can't say specifically, so I'll just give you kind of a gist.
Very good.
One of them is a book that's all about spiders. It's a nonfiction book, but it's told kind of in a with kind of like a story element. So it's about these two kids who find this talking spider in their basement, and she shrinks them down to her size, and they go on an adventure and meet different kinds of spiders from all over the world. And it's you know, to kind of so you can learn everything you ever wanted to know about spiders, all kind of in one kind of fun little adventure.
That sounds great.
Yeah. The other one is I'm actually just starting it now, and it's a activity book slash comic book. So it's kind of like comic that has mazes or puzzles or other kind of like find the object puzzles. So you help solve the mystery of this haunted house by reading and doing the activities alongside the characters.
Oh, that's interesting. Are you also building the activities as well?
I
or-
am. Yeah. I had I did a mini comic version of it that I sent to the company to pitch it, and they loved it, so they picked it up. But I just did it for fun a couple of years ago, just because I had a month off and wanted to do something using that month. So I did it, and they ended up liking it enough to want to publish it.
Yeah, that sounds like a challenging thing to do and sustain over the course of a long book to me. Just coming up with puzzles.
Yeah.
I mean, I can totally see coming up with like one puzzle or 5 puzzles, but if you've got to come up with like 50 puzzles, that seems a little hard.
No, it really is, and that's I've been working on the kind of thumbnailing and writing process for that for the past couple months, and it has been a lot of just like I've ordered a ton of puzzle and activity books online, and just going through those and being like, okay, what different types of puzzle can I use that I haven't used already?
Sure.
You know?
Sure. Is there anything that you're doing where you're collaborating with other people?
So there's a project in the works right now that I may or may not be doing, where there's a different writer on it. I just I don't think I can say anything about that yet, since there's not even like a contract.
No, I understand. It was more I was actually just sort of curious about the differences between working with someone else to collaborate and being a cartoonist yourself.
Totally. Yeah. I have worked with other people before. I worked with Kevin Panetta, who's an artist or who's a writer who's in the DC area. He and I did a little comic a while ago together, and actually for that Invader Zim issue that I mentioned earlier, that was a pretty interesting collaboration. Me and my really close friend Matt C. Lee. He has a book from Oni called Dead Weight. He and I decided that we wanted to do this Zim issue together, and we wanted to do it kind of in a unique way. So we wrote it together, and then I did all of the backgrounds in it, and he drew all the characters in it. So that was kind of an interesting collaboration, kind of outside the traditional way that you collaborate on comics. But normally, I think I prefer to work alone, just because I really like the kind of freedom of doing whatever I want, and being able to make changes up until kind of the last minute, just in terms of script, like, oh, this doesn't fit on the page the way I thought it would, or whatever.
Sure.
That's something that I really value a lot too. So
yeah, I can see that. All right, a couple of last questions from the kids that I get in
Yeah.
email. From Enzo again. The humor is so good in this book. What was
Oh,
the
thank you.
inspiration for your humor?
I think I mentioned Bone earlier. That's definitely a big part of it. I really like just kind of goofy, fun humor. That's like it's fun for me to write because then I just get to laugh at my own jokes for like, months afterwards as I'm drawing it. So I really like writing humor that's just kind of like goofy and silly and fun because it makes it more fun for me to draw it.
Makes sense to me. Makes sense to
Yeah.
me. I think, do we have anything else on the, no? Okay. So I think that I will end this with this question then.
Yeah.
There's kids out there who are maybe interested in being comic artists themselves. There's probably adults watching this at some point who
Yeah.
want to be comics artists. What would be the sort of one piece of advice that you would give someone who wants to do comics to be successful at doing comics?
It's gonna sound like really obvious advice, but make a lot of comics. Comics are crazy in terms of in terms of the amount that you can learn just by drawing one comic. I don't think there's any other art form that will teach you as much as comics will if you just draw one yourself. You have to know how to do pacing, you have to know how to lay things out, you have to be able to make the characters act, you have to be able to design clothes, you have to be able to draw everything. I mean, you don't have to be able to draw everything. That's actually probably like one of the least important skills in drawing comics is the ability to draw really well. So you don't have to be like a crazy good artist, or you can just be starting out and you can make your own comics and they can be really good. It's an art form that that gives you essentially total creative freedom, and you get to tell a story, by yourself if you want to. So doing it will teach you a lot about drawing, a lot about how to make good comics, and it also, I think part of what I like about comics so much is the community. There's just so many people that are out there who just love comics because they're fun to read, they're fun to draw, whatever. And making your own comics instantly just puts you in that community. Like if you make comics, you're part of the comics community. If you read comics, you're part of the comics community. And so I think just making comics, if you want to make comics, just make some. Don't worry about whether it's super good or whether the art looks the way you want it to or whatever. Just make one. When it's done, give it to people or sell it to people or do whatever you want, or don't show it to anyone if you don't want to. And then just make another one, because every single time you draw one, you will get way better at drawing, and you'll get way better at drawing comics. So
I love that answer. That is a perfect answer. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And thank you for this book. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I haven't seen any of the kids because we're all locked down,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure the kids all love this one too because it was just
Good.
fun and funny and action-packed, and there's all kinds of zany stuff going on, and we for sure want to see more of this. I want to really thank you for your time here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't go away. Stick around. We got something else for you after we end the broadcast. But for the kids at home or the people at home, actually, the kids in the club have the book. If you are not a member of the club and you want something that's zany and action-packed and a great fantasy story, and it's got all kinds of cool monsters in it, and like lots of action, and it's a great fun book. I thoroughly recommend The Sunken Tower. This is a book that you should buy. You can get it at our web store, blah, blah, blah. Get it at any comic shop. Comics are awesome. Next month's book is When Stars Are Scattered by Victoria Jameson and Omar Muhammad. And we will have both of them here to talk to us. Well, at least I hope we're going to have both of them here. Omar's wife is very pregnant and is due just about the time that we're going to have the meeting. So we'll see if that works out or not. But this is a great book, and I think everyone's going to enjoy that. So we'll see you next month with more. I want to thank our sponsors at The Beat. I want to thank Jordan Willix for doing our great tech support and running the show. I want to thank TAIT Howard for being here and making a great comic. And I want to thank all you kids out there for reading comics and loving comics and just comics. Yeah, comics. We'll see y'all next month. And we're out. Very good. Okay, TAIT, can you please